This is the Good Government Show.
We got to look out for this country, this planet. We're trashing it too quickly. So, the EPA was sort of like emergency response on a grand scale in the 70s and early 80s. The vast majority of what we do, more than 85% of our budget and our staff actually goes to cleanup programs and providing basic services, not to enforcement. Despite the vitriol that sometimes we hear on TV, the folks who show up to work at EPA have their hearts in the right place. Government, requires, showing up and holding ourselves accountable and being transparent about it. It's a human enterprise, and the more that we engage with other humans in a meaningful way, the more that we'll truly get things done.
The Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA. On this episode, we're going to hear about this government agency from, until recently, the former Mid-Atlantic Regional Director. Welcome to the Good Government Show. I'm your host, Dave Martin. The EPA has certainly taken a beating in the public square. Its detractors say it's a bloated bureaucracy. It costs industry too much. It strangles the ability of business to provide jobs and the goods we need. However, the EPA fills a vital role in making sure our air, our land, and our water are clean, clear, and safe. But don't believe me. Adam Ortiz spent the last 4 years at the EPA as their regional director. He oversaw projects and cleanup programs with a $2 billion budget. And that may sound like a lot, but as he will tell you, there's a lot of work to do. And I got to talk about my favorite state, West Virginia, and he talks about the work the EPA is doing with some of those old coal-dependent counties and towns. We thought it'd be instructive on the Good Government Show to talk to people in government and find out what they do and how they do it. We wanted to find out if these government agencies we talk to are really necessary, and more important, where does our money go? With the EPA facing potential staff layoffs and the holdup of funds targeted to a cleaner environment, I wanted to hear from someone at the EPA about the work that they do. As Adam Ortiz will tell you, it goes to a lot of places. It cleans up Superfund sites. It converts old garbage pits. It cleans up runoff into rivers, lakes, and bays, and they do it with the stakeholders who want to do the right thing and keep the environment from getting worse. So after this, we get into the details with Adam Ortiz, the former EPA Regional Director. AI isn't the future of government, it's happening now. Let Polimorphic power your government with AI like other agencies are already doing. Polimorphic helps you power resident-first service to streamline requests while reducing staff workloads and speeding up how your citizens get answers. It's a secure system that's built for government. You'll see immediate results with more informed citizens. Want to see how AI can help you power a service-first government? Visit polymorphic.com. That's polymorphic.com. Welcome to the Good Government Show. I have with me, very happy to have our guest today, Adam Ortiz, who is the current Deputy Secretary for the state of Maryland for their Department of Environment. But prior to that, he served as the Regional Administrator for the Environmental Protection Agency for the Mid-Atlantic region. Have I got your resume right?
Yeah, so far so good, Dave.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Adam. Great to have you here on the Good Government Show. And we're going to talk about the environment. We're going to talk about how the environment gets cleaned and how you've managed to help make that happen. So let's start a little bit with your most recent role as the Regional Administrator for the Mid-Atlantic region for the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency. How long were you there and what did you do?
Well, I served in the Biden administration, so almost the entire term that he was in there. And we oversaw 6 states in the District of Columbia and 7 federally recognized tribes. And our job was to help states and localities implement the laws that help keep our environment clean, but also go in above and beyond to give them the support necessary to keep their neighborhoods clean. So it was rewarding. It was great. And I think we got a lot done.
So let's talk money because, that's one of the things that's in the news right now is, how much are we spending? How much are we spending? The EPA has a total budget of around $10 billion. In your Mid-Atlantic region, you monitored or, had a $2 billion budget. That's a lot of money. How'd you spend it? What'd you do with all that cash?
Well, on the headline is a little misleading because that is a lot of money, but that's not EPA's money. So that's the people's money. And, the way that we give it out is that it's, mostly competitive, and it's, pass through money to states and localities to, mostly do major environmental infrastructure projects, stuff that we take for granted every day, like drinking water systems, wastewater systems. And folks may not know, but that could be $100 million project. So that money goes pretty quick, but it's competitive. And, we have scientists and technical folks and grants managers that make sure that the recipients are able to spend the money, that they have good projects, that they qualify, and then we, monitor that until the project is done and into the ground. So this is, just getting money to places that need it the most to support, the basic environmental protections that Americans expect.
So let's break it down. Let's get back to the basics. What does the EPA do? I mean, it's a relatively new agency. Actually, former President Richard Nixon created the EPA. What's the mission of the EPA?
It's really simple. It's to protect human health in the environment. And in the 70s, when the agency was created, and sort of the big landmark statutes that govern our work, and people have to remember that executive agencies, we carry out the work of Congress. And Congress, so the laws are created by Congress, and Congress is created by the voters, people, to carry out the will.
You keep bringing it back to the people, so it's all our fault you're there.
Not at all. We're all on the same team, and so back in the 70s, things were really bad, and some of us who were around in the 70s remember, we couldn't see the skylines to our cities because smog and air pollution was so bad. Cancer rates were escalating quickly. All sorts of health indicators. Rivers were catching on fire.
Well, right. Lake Erie caught fire.
Yep. Lake Erie, the Cuyahoga. But actually, rivers all across the country had caught on fire. There were a few that caught the attention of the three networks back then, but that was not uncommon. So that's a problem, there was a I don't know if you remember it. I'm older than you. There was a famous television ad where people were throwing garbage in the street, and there was a Native American in a canoe stood on the sideline and shed a tear for the garbage that was, at his feet. And that was a problem throughout the country. I do remember that ad. Dating myself with you, my friend.
Maybe you're as old as me. I don't think so, but okay.
Well, we're both aging well.
Yes, thank you.
But that ad, and a lot of people remember it, was just a time where it was like, whoa, hey, we gotta look out for this country, this planet. We're trashing it too quickly. So, EPA was sort of like emergency response on a grand scale in the 70s and early 80s. And now, the mission is still the same: protect human health and the environment. But it's that stuff, making sure that we're controlling chemicals that are going into waterways, that people can turn on the tap and drink out of it safely, and that sewage is treated before it's put in our streams and rivers. But there's a lot more stuff going on. There's literally tens of thousands more chemicals to keep an eye on. There's, much more industry. There's almost 4 times as many cars on the road. So there's many more points of pollution into our environment because the population and the economy have grown so much, not to mention climate change. So it's a big job. And, people talk about the size and, in the suggestion in the budget question that you brought up early on, we're still catching up and cleaning up problems from 10, 50, 100 years ago, in addition to trying to make sure that we're not introducing, more pollution into the environment that's a public health. So it's a big country, it's a big environment, and it's a big job for environmental agencies.
There is an argument that the EPA creates too many restrictions, that they put in too many guardrails, that they stifle the ability for individual companies and people to do the things they want, that they limit business, and they ultimately hurt people's pocketbook just because there are too many rules and regulations. How do you respond to that?
Well, there's ample evidence to the contrary. I mean, right now, our economy is the biggest that it has ever been. We have almost full employment. We have an incredibly sophisticated market. This country is as robust and sophisticated economically than it's ever been. And at the same time, it's also cleaner than it's been since before the Industrial Revolution. We can do both things. We're Americans, man. Like, we're freaking, we can figure these things out. We can grow and invent things and manufacture things without poisoning people in the process or poisoning the environment. I think, we can do both of those things. So there's ample evidence to the contrary. And I'll tell you, I've been, a regulator, quote unquote regulator in environmental protection for almost 2 decades now. And by and large, industry is totally on board with what, we're doing. They always say, hey, we want to follow the rules. We want to be good neighbors. We want to do things right. So, I would say that, the vast majority of industry, gets it. They want to have good relationships with their workforce. They want to have good relationships with the cities and counties that they're located in, and they want to be stewards. I mean, they also fish. They also have kids that play in playgrounds, so I think that there is an ethic. So that's like an oversimplification that's used for political purposes that just doesn't bear out in reality. This is, environmental protection is really just responsibility. We just ought to be responsible and clean up any messes that we make. And, when we can't, it's just like we don't take our garbage, put it in a bag and throw it over the fence in our neighbor's backyard. We're responsible for taking care of it. And that's really what it's all about. So most of that is just, in the words of a famous recently empowered politician, malarkey. We can do both of those things, and the strength of the economy, I think, is a testament to that.
I want to talk about some of the things that you worked on directly. For regular listeners of the Good Government Show, they will know I have a fascination with all things West Virginia. It is largely, especially in Appalachia, was a very coal-dependent economy. And I know that some of the projects you've worked on are a surface coal mining and brownfield revitalization. Tell me how you've spent some of the $2 billion to help the folks of Appalachia.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you're asking about this. I also love West Virginia. I live in Maryland, so I'm not far. I've done a lot of hiking there for my entire adult life, and being able to work in the state and in partnership with the state and with the communities had been an honor when I was at EPA. And it's a remarkable place. Again, despite the political rhetoric, there's arguably been no better friend to West Virginia than EPA. The vast majority of what we do, more than 85% of our budget and our staff actually goes to cleanup programs and providing basic services, not to enforcement. There's this.
Say that again. So 85% of your budget goes to cleanup.
Yep, cleanup and supporting systems like wastewater systems and drinking water systems. Like, those are the big and the cleanups, Superfund cleanups, brownfields cleanups. Those things are super expensive if you're going to get them right. And that's where most of our resources go. And that, I can tell by the incredulity in your tone of your voice that most people don't realize that. Like, the enforcement piece is important. We do that. But that's not enough, because we got a lot of cleanup to do, man. And especially in West Virginia, where, a lot of beautiful places had been truly sacrificed,
right.
Before there were, environmental protections. There's literally hundreds and hundreds of surface mines. If folks are at a computer, like, pull up a Google satellite map and zoom in, and you'll see these large swaths of land that look like the moon, hundreds of them. And then brownfields. So brownfields are contaminated land, contaminated parcels where there was dumping or industry or manufacturing of some kind, where materials weren't handled responsibly. And those parcels are too toxic to be redeveloped or for people to do stuff on. So those cleanups are critical, and only the federal government can do them, because states like West Virginia, where there's lower incomes across the state, losing population, and the expense and the risk in cleaning up these is just beyond the reach.
Well, I went to a place it used to be the Ravencrest Mine. It was a mountaintop removal site in Madison, outside of Madison, West Virginia, Boone County, and they turned the top of the mountain into a lavender farm. And now they have lavender products, and they put people to work, and they've branched into other areas. Is this kind of stuff that EPA gets involved in?
Yes. And you and I both have a friend in common in the operators of that lavender farm.
Jocelyn, yes.
It's it's very cool and innovative. So that's exactly the kind of stuff. I mean, we are, people don't think of it this way, but it is true. We are also an economic development agency, because we will go into the brownfields in coordination with the local stakeholders and the local municipalities to clean up these places so they can be redeveloped or reused for agriculture or for parks or for cleaner industries. But yeah, that lavender farm is a great example. People have been looking at other ways to creatively reuse the mountaintop mines, but it's a drop in the bucket, because there literally are hundreds and hundreds of them that are just still sacrifice zones.
Are there any brownfield projects in West Virginia that come to mind that you can point to where you spent your money wisely and made a difference?
Oh, there's a couple. A really cool one is in a city called Beach Bottom. It was an old, I forget precisely the manufacturer. I think it was a battery manufacturer, contaminated land. It was right on the Ohio River. Great location for shipping. And that's where, a lot of industries are on the rivers, because it was easy to ship and transport stuff. Nowadays, people can still transport stuff, but we have to get those places back online. So we, in partnership with the community and the state, we cleaned it up, and there was an electric pontoon boat manufacturer that took over that facility. So Wow. That's a cool thing. Another great example is
how was the electric pontoon on the water?
Yeah. And it went fast, like you wouldn't think of it, but it went really fast, and it was really quiet. And who doesn't love a pontoon boat, especially if you can get a cooler of beer onto it?
It's like a moving bar on a pontoon boat. When I was down in West Virginia, I was walking around, and one of the guys was like, "You got to move here. You got to move here." He's like, "Look, there's a lake. You could put your boat there. Look, there's a river. You could go on that boat. You could bring your boat here." So,
all right, man. Well, remember my number, man. I'll bring the beer. Okay.
Okay. I found this doing some reading about you, a Superfund site in Pennsylvania. It was in Berks County. It was Crossley Farm. Our old friend Christian Lineback is a county commissioner in Berks County. You spent a few $1 million putting this together. Tell me how this was money well spent.
So if I'm not conflating it with another project, I believe that this was a farm where for years the farmer for $20 would let anybody come in and dump whatever they wanted in a certain part of the farm that wasn't in use. And a lot of heavy metals, PCBs, all sorts of toxic material that got into the water table. So, to get to your $2 billion question, that's an expensive cleanup. How do you, just the engineering.
I think I saw the figure $10.9 million to do the cleanup at Crossley Farm. Does that sound right?
That sounds right. I mean, because think about it. Think about it, like finding the places where things are dumped. That's a lot of sampling of the land. Then getting down into the water table or the aquifer to figure out, how much of it has been contaminated by a toxic plume, and then doing the underground engineering to control that from leaching into other groundwater or the streams or rivers, because a lot of that stuff will pop up. Water will pop up in a creek or a spring someplace else. That's where a lot of the expense is. And that's a lot, that's a good example of, that's something somebody was doing 50, 60 years ago. I think that farmer was taking that material, and here we are, all these decades later. Before you and I were born, he was doing this, and we're cleaning up after this guy, who made maybe a few $1,000 letting his neighbors dump stuff. But yeah, there's literally, there's 1,300 projects like that around the country, sites like that. Only about 100 of them are in remediation. So when I say that,
Explain remediation.
So cleaning up, that in the process of like, okay, we've assessed what the problem is. This is how we clean it up. And then to get the bulldozers or the pumps or the equipment into the ground. So that's a tiny percentage of, the liability that's still out there. So people should not be looking to cut EPA. They should be finding ways to help expand it to get these communities cleaner and back online and more economically viable and healthy.
So I'm going to talk about a project that I'm sure is near and dear to your heart, Chesapeake Bay. I'm a sailor. It is one of the premier sailing spots in the United States, if not the world. This was right in your backyard. What did you do there? That's an open-ended question for you. What did you do in the Chesapeake Bay?
Yeah, my gosh, how much time do you have? Do you have enough bandwidth?
It's a podcast. We can go as long as you like.
Well, in a nutshell, so the Mid-Atlantic region, which was where I served as the EPA administrator, probably 80% of the landmass there was part of the Chesapeake Bay watershed. And for those folks who aren't familiar with this part of the country, it's the largest estuary in the world. 8 states drain into it, and it was the fish market of the country in the early part of the Republic. And by the 1980s, the oyster population, the crab population had been decimated. Bacteria, E. coli, and all sorts of streams and rivers. It was unswimmable, unfishable, and a big economic disaster, frankly, for this part of the country. So states got together and EPA in the 80s and said, okay, we got to work together and clean it up. So I came along in 2021 as sort of the captain of that effort, and to try to get it going in the right direction. And overall, the Bay had slowly been stabilizing and getting better. But at the same time, we have growing population. We have more sprawl development. We still have more pollution inputs, and then thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of farms as well in the watershed. So my goal was to work with the states to get them to step up more. And I did that by using the powers of the EPA, the regulatory and enforcement powers, but also the grant making and the incentive and the policy making and that sort of softer stuff. So make a long story short, when I got there, the states were suing each other and suing the EPA. But by the end, we were working together, and we stepped up the investment and the amount of farms and industries that were putting conservation measures into place. And by the time I left, just a few months ago, the Chesapeake Bay received its highest grade in 22 years for health. And that's just because people were working together. But it wouldn't have happened if EPA in its leadership role was able to convene the states and hold us all accountable with some tough love.
So you were Mr. EPA tough love, is that correct?
Yes. I'm tough guy, but I'm a softie.
Okay,
inside, man. So got a lot of love, Dave. All
right, good. Let's talk about drinking water for a moment. Is our drinking water safe? Is it clean? Are you optimistic? Please say yes.
Yes.
Please say yes.
By and large.
Okay.
And
having said that,
and there are threats. And it's and this goes to the role of EPA being able to provide that funding to places that are struggling to keep up their drinking water operations. And those generally are poorer cities and more rural places that have drinking water systems and don't have the operation or the technology to deal with the threats. And so what are the principal threats? Lead is always a threat. And many of us remember Flint, Michigan, and what happens when you don't have a good operation and you aren't watching it. So we're trying to excel. So the agency, and I hope it's continuing under the current administration, is accelerating the removal and replacement of lead pipes, A. But B, emerging contaminants. And this is, again, like the federal government struggling to keep up with the threats and the liabilities that are around us. PFAS, this new generation of chemicals, it's around us. It's in our clothing. It's, in our cookware. It's in probably, 60% of the products that we use on any given day. Has been found in all sorts of places, contaminating drinking water. Not always at high thresholds to the health, but we're still getting our head and our science around it. And that's an expensive one. We're finding it in farms. We're finding it in suburban and urban places where there was dumping or manufacturing where the stuff got into the water table. So it's a work in progress. But by and large, people can turn on the tap. There's still a lot of reporting and oversight, and that's the job of the EPA and the state agencies. But, there's always threats on the horizon if we aren't vigilant.
How difficult is it to work with corporations, people that may not necessarily jump to mind as environmentalists, like, coal mining companies and, fossil fuel companies? How difficult is it for the EPA to work with these folks to, make sure everyone's doing the right thing?
By and large, it's there's more collaboration and cooperation than I think people would assume. And part of that is because the laws are the laws, man. Yeah. The laws are the laws, the permits are the permits. You got to meet these requirements. Otherwise, you're going to get in trouble. And the governments, have to do that job. And if governments don't do that job, whether it's a locality or a state or the federal government, we get sued, and we lose. So by and large, corporations are compliant with existing laws. There's bad actors. And, it requires resources and good operation to get to the bad actors, build the case, hold them accountable, and get them to do the right thing. And if not, take them to court and make them do the right thing or go out of business, But that's a smaller percentage overall. Where the challenge is doing the new stuff. We know that greenhouse gases are not under control, that, severe weather events are increasing. And that requires, there's only so many laws on the books now because of today's politics to control carbon. So, having as states and localities step up, that, that industry is finding a way to work with them to meet those goals. And many are, but some are not. And there are voluntary actions, just like, we can do voluntary things at home that some corporations are doing and some are not. But it gets toxic the higher that you go in the atmosphere. It gets toxic, higher we go in our political atmosphere, where things get oversimplified, where the big industry groups, demonize folks who are just trying to, keep us safe and healthy and clean. And that has a negative effect throughout the chain. But I would say, and I've worked with hundreds and hundreds of them in regulatory matters, community interventions. There's a lot of folks in those industries that are trying to do the right thing. They don't always do it. But the more that we work and hold each other accountable with toughness necessary sometimes.
Back to the tough love. Well, let me ask you a question about something. This is, here's what I do. Whenever I go to a bar or restaurant and somebody hands me a drink with a plastic straw in, and I take the straw and I hand it back to them and I said, I'm giving this back to you. Don't give people straws unless they ask for them. And some of my friends go, what a jerk. And some of the waiters or waitresses look at me and go, what a jerk. And some go, oh, thank you. I agree. I mean, does that make a difference?
Of course it does.
And what are the things we can do on a personal level?
Well, that's...
Should I keep sending the straw back?
Well, we all have power. There's the environment's a big thing. It requires a big team working together. And, at the federal level, the federal folks have to use their powers and their influence, and our leaders in Congress have to constantly, be leaning in and doing their job. States and localities have roles as well. And personally, we do too. Is one straw, going to reverse climate change? No. But is it helping? Yes.
Okay.
Is it helping
So keep doing it.
litter? Is it helping, keep, more plastics and microplastics out of the environment? But what can people do? Just everyday decisions. We're empowered to make choices when we're at the grocery store or shopping online. There are more sustainable products. There's stuff around the house that can be used or reused. There's thrift stores, and there's ways to share and borrow things among in different communities. There's choices in the appliances that we choose, in vehicles that are more efficient. All those things add up, and people are getting more educated. The market is responding, and that means that we all have power.
What would you like people to know about the EPA that they probably don't know?
Despite the vitriol that sometimes we hear on TV, the folks who show up to work at EPA have their hearts in the right place and are bringing their gifts and talents to protect people in ways that many of us take for granted. So just to appreciate that, the quality of life that we have is maintained by people that are carrying out the work of the people. That's the most important thing. The enforcement role is an important role. Like, EPA has to do its job. But most of the people listening to your program, when they flush the toilet or turn the tap on or consume a product or have something in their garage, it's been made safe because of the laws and regulations that EPA carries out in coordination with the states. So a lot of the quality of life that we enjoy in this country is not done by accident. It's done by intention, by folks in the public sector working with the private sector and consumers. But there's good people behind our quality of life, and they need your support.
All right, we're going to get into your philosophy of government, and that's going to come up right after this. Once you wrap up this episode of The Good Government Show, give a listen to our friends over at Good News for Lefties. This daily podcast highlights news stories that show there's more good news out there. Other people in government are really trying to do the right thing. That's Good News for Lefties. Listen where you're listening now. So we are back with Adam Ortiz, who is the former regional administrator for the Mid-Atlantic for the EPA and the current deputy secretary for the state of Maryland Department of the Environment. All right, here we go. We're going to get to the heart of your thinking on government. What is good government? What makes government effective?
So, we serve the people. Of course we do. The danger of government is that it becomes too insulated, that it's not always in touch with the people. And that's a criticism that's heard a lot. So it's incumbent on those of us in the public sector, but also, citizens and residents, to have a spirit of engagement, that it's important to get out of the offices, that it's important to show up, that it's important to listen to people and engage in meaningful dialogue. So, my mantra in all the places I've worked and all the teams is to engage with the tough problems. Our job is to take on the tough stuff, and we can't do it alone. Sitting in an office, someplace in a cubicle, you can do some stuff, but you need more hands on deck. Engage the stakeholders, the communities that are affected, the industries that are related. So I believe that it's a team effort, that we are in fact on the same team, whether you're a consumer or a resident or member of industry, we all have a responsibility for the environment. But government, requires, showing up and holding ourselves accountable and being transparent about it. And then I have found that when people do work together, when you're transparent about it and open, things get done. You figure things out, and what we see today is the opposite. We see people not coming together. I think people come together in small ways every day, but there's a philosophy now that we have to blame each other, that we can't trust each other, that people are out to get you. And that, the problems that exist, should be, ignored, and that we don't, require committed people, to show up and figure them out. The retreat from, integrity and telling the truth and transparency, I think is problematic and is a poison in our ability to perform good government. So it's a human enterprise, and the more that we engage with other humans in a meaningful way, the more that we'll truly get things done.
What's the role of the people? What should they do? How should they hold government accountable? How should they, if they don't like what they see, what should the people do?
Yeah, same philosophy. Engage. Hear something on the news, check it out. Somebody tells you something that's upsetting, check it out, do your homework, and reach out. And, there's lots of paths to the public sector. So, if it's a certain agency, or, if a stoplight is out, or, whatever the issue is, you can try to go to that agency, but if you can't, you've got, state representatives that will return your call. You've got federal representatives that can return your call. Most government agencies now are pretty transparent online, Instagram accounts, Facebook accounts, lean in. And it's not to throw rocks, but to solve problems. If people show up trying to help get assistance to solve a problem, you usually get a good response.
So what drew you to public service? Was this something you always wanted to do?
I get satisfaction personally out of helping and doing things that are bigger than myself. And I've just been rewarded in every stage of my career that, I certainly don't have the answers all of the time, or maybe even most of the time, but find that, when I work together with other people, we do come up with the answers. In my very first public service job, I was a beach lifeguard in Ocean City, Maryland. So
Okay.
That was my first job, but my first public office was a small town mayor. And as a small town mayor, the most satisfaction I got was actually getting to know every single person in this 1,400 person town, and all the different perspectives, all the different countries, all the different races, all the different political bents. And at the end of the day, pretty much everybody was pretty cool. They all did the same things. And that was just an honor to help bring people together to help improve that little corner of the world. So I just get a lot of satisfaction about making a positive difference and leaving something behind that makes somebody's life a little better, and somebody can pick up that baton and improve on the stuff that I did. So
you started off as a mayor. Who's your political hero? And, you've stayed in government. What inspires you to, who or what inspires you to keep going?
It's, all these people that I touch on the ground, and I love getting out. I love walking neighborhoods and meeting with folks. So that is an inspiration all the time. So I try to get out of this office as much as I can. Historically, my heroes are Robert Kennedy Sr., RFK.
Senior, okay.
Particularly his 1968 campaign, which I'm a student of. Abraham Lincoln. I have a bust of Abraham Lincoln on the other side of the office here.
All right.
Harriet Tubman, who's a great Marylander, who I think was a remarkable public servant in lots of different ways. I go to them to guidance, and there's, a lot of saints in the public service pantheon to draw upon. So I try to be a student as much as possible of history in public service, because they always have something to teach us.
You've been a mayor. You've worked on the county level in environment. You worked at the federal level at the EPA. Now you're in the state government. What would you like people to know about government? That
it's certainly not perfect, but it functions overall pretty well. That, by and large, there's good collaboration between different entities at different levels. We do hold ourselves accountable. There's absolutely inefficiencies, like a lot of those criticisms certainly have some truth to them. But most people who show up in a public service job are doing it for the right reasons. And everywhere I go, and it doesn't matter if it's federal level or a teeny tiny town, I find that to be true. And also, people can always ask. With freedom of information, you can ask any question you want. of any government entity, and they have to answer that question unless it's a national security matter or a personnel matter or something.
Right.
So the power is always with the people, and every level of government, by and large, is willing to answer those questions and be a partner. What was,
just looking the last 4 years at EPA, what was the best part of the job? And, the follow-up is, what was the hardest part of the job?
It was really a remarkable time because there was so much momentum. And, for a moment, Congress came together with the president and got a lot of stuff done, investing in the country. And, as I said, there's, still, lots of Superfund sites and hundreds of thousands of brownfields around the country. But we began to show up and clean up places that had long been neglected. And I had done 450 external engagements in my 3 years there. And everywhere I went, and it could be the deepest blue place or the deepest red place. And I went to many Trumpy places where lots of people showed up in Trump hats and stuff. And I still went around, shook everybody's hand and said, hey, thanks for having me here. Thanks for working with us. And inevitably, to a person, I got, wow, thank you for helping. Thank you for showing up. We've been working on this problem here in West Virginia or in Pennsylvania or in Maryland or in DC, for decades. And, finally, we have somebody here and your team, helping us fix this problem, and that was the most satisfying thing. The toughest thing is just the time. Like, man, time goes fast. I mean, you and I barely remember the 70s, like it was yesterday.
Yeah, but, right.
But the time just goes so fast. And then also watching sort of the assault we see today on the workforce and on the good work that people have done is heartbreaking, to say the least. But it was a privilege.
Did you always see yourself running for office in public service? Were you president of the student council?
Well, I wanted to be a rock star or a baseball player when I was in high school. Neither of those have worked out.
They didn't quite pan out?
Yeah, I'm going to walk on, though, to tryouts. And,
maybe you know what? You could throw the first pitch. Maybe the Orioles will give you a call.
No, I haven't done that yet, man.
All right, well, listen, run for governor, all right? Then I think you could throw out the first pitch.
No, but I've always really cared, and a seventh grade teacher actually really turned me on to history and government and civics, and that has always been inspiring for me, and I've always wanted to help in some way, and I've been able to help, and people keep asking me to apply for jobs or positions. And as long as I can do that, I'll continue to do that. But I'm just glad to be of service. I find that deeply satisfying.
So you're in Maryland. So we will talk about Maryland crabs, as I'm sure one of your favorite dishes. But what else do you do for fun besides crack crabs on the table with newspapers underneath you?
Well, I'm always waiting for a friend to invite me out on his boat. So
gotcha. Come on up to Oyster Bay whenever you're ready.
I'm a big outdoors person, so I do a lot of hiking and paddling. I love the mountains, and there's plenty of mountains out here on the East Coast. I am a musician, so I play in different bands and perform from time to time. So that's a good way to use different parts of my brain. So have you taken a hike through the New River Gorge, the newest national park in West Virginia? I certainly have, and I've whitewater rafted it with some of the park rangers there. Oh, I just walked one of the trails. Didn't get to whitewater raft. Sorry. Oh yeah. Oh, you got to go back, man. Yeah. All right. Next time. Tips. Overall, we talked about this a little bit, but what's the most important thing you think that you did at EPA? I think the most important thing that I did, and this was a team effort in the Biden administration, was focus on the communities that needed the most help. And there's, as we look around, a lot of this country is cleaner and more beautiful, but there's, some pockets that are stubbornly polluted, where life expectancy is, 15 years or more less than other places, and that the air and the water and the ground is dirty and unhealthy, and people pay the price for it in public health. So we focused on those places. And again, all over the political spectrum, Black and brown communities, urban communities, blue communities, but also white communities, rural communities, mountain communities. and that investment. And that is what we refer to as environmental justice,
okay,
which is now a prohibited word in the federal government. And as we speak, an entire almost 200 employees are about to be laid off because they work on environmental justice like it's a crime. But that we showed up in these places, whatever you call it, in disadvantaged communities, and help people, get closer to the quality of life that many of us in the middle class have enjoyed for a long time. That has been the most satisfying, and to see the team inspired, like people really care that are doing this work, and to see people work together and get things done and make a difference is remarkable, and you can't put a price on that.
This is called the Good Government Show. We always like to bring it back to good government. Give me an example of a good government project that you're really proud of that you were able to pull off at EPA, and maybe just a small thing.
So this was small and big. So back to the Chesapeake Bay and to the boating adventures we're going to have together soon.
Yes.
One of the biggest reasons that the Bay has struggled to really rebound has been from pollution from small farms, mostly upstream in northern Maryland, Eastern Shore, and Pennsylvania. And early on in the job, my very first public meeting was with the Pennsylvania Farm Bureau, and we were in litigation with the states at the time, under a lot of criticism, to get the Bay effort on track. And I said, hey, you guys. This is a big challenge. I'm under a lot of pressure here. I want to work with you. And there's just too much pollution coming out of Pennsylvania. What can we do? And, they said, we agree, man. We want to work together with you. What we could use your help with is helping the state of Pennsylvania have a program for helping small farmers control their pollution. It's expensive to do it. A lot of small family farms from the colonial era, so tiny places, a lot of Amish farms, they can't spend $100,000 on controlling cow manure or different types of technologies. They could use some help, and that's something we don't have in the state. And that was an aha moment. And back to your question about my philosophy on governing, showing up, engaging, listening, and that nugget was like, oh, I didn't know that. Let's work together on that. Let's solve that problem. Let's get past the blame game and, federal government, you suck, you don't listen, or farmers, you don't care about none of that ended up being true. When we got that nugget, I was like, all right, let's get to work on that. And we did. And I won't bore you with all the details, but at the end of the day, we worked with Republican leaders in the state legislature to provide that kind of assistance to small farmers. And the program is now in its third year. I forget the number. It's maybe 500 farms have been helped, just small farmers doing things to improve the sustainability and the conservation measures on their farm and the viability and the health of their farm and their livestock and their families that live on the farm. So that was a long answer to your very short, simple question.
Well, we are trying to spread the word of good government in large ways and small. How are we doing?
Doing great. I'm so glad this program exists. I'm so glad that you let people tell their stories as we all learn from each other. Something I say a lot, the public sector, one big advantage it has over the private sector is there's no intellectual property. If you have a good idea in Toledo, and that's helpful in Des Moines, call your friend in Toledo and learn how to do that and borrow that idea. So perhaps I helped expose some people some different ideas as I've learned from others on this program and in my public life, and that's what it's all about. It's a big team. We're all in this team together, and we're all here to listen and learn and support each other.
Well, we hope that we like to share best practices in any way we can. Adam Ortiz, the former regional administrator for the Mid-Atlantic region for the Environmental Protection Agency. Good luck in your new role as the Deputy Secretary for the state of Maryland in their Department of Environment. Good luck. It's been a pleasure talking with you. Thank you for coming on the show, and we'll talk again.
Thanks, Dave. I appreciate you, everything that this program represents, and I'll continue to be listening.
All right, good. Please do. And the boat goes in the water in Long Island Sound in May, so come on up and we'll do some sailing.
All right, man.
My best friend is a friend with a boat, right?
Right on.
Very good. Thanks for coming on.
You bet.
The Good Government Show is sponsored by Our. That's OUR for Our Community. Get involved. We hear that all the time from government leaders. Our co-brands with your government's name and logo. Your staff and the people you serve are connected and part of your community. From any device, your members provide reliable data and meaningful feedback. Ask a question like, do we want more parkland or better homeless services? More engaged conversations come through the Our app. Visit Ourco, that's OURCO.com, and book a demonstration. Get out and get engaged. That's what Adam Ortiz, the former EPA regional director, says is important for everyone. Get out of the office, get outside and do something, all of us. And I'm glad to hear I'm not wasting my time returning plastic straws. Yeah, it's one small thing, but if everyone did one small thing, those results would make a difference. The EPA covers a lot of ground, and they do it with one goal: clean water, clean land, clean air. We all want that. It's good to hear people like Adam do that every day for all of us. Well, thanks for listening to another example of how government works for all of us. Please like us and share us with your friends and review us right here where you're listening. And check out our website, goodgovernmentshow.com, for extras. Help us keep telling stories of good government in action everywhere. Join us again for another episode right here. I'm Dave Martin, and this is The Good Government Show. The Good Government Show is a Valley Park production. Jim Ludlow, Dave Martin, that's me, and David Snyder are the executive producers. Our show is edited and produced by Jason Stershic. Please subscribe, then share us, and like us and review us. That's the best way to make sure we're able to keep telling these stories of our government working for all of us. Then listen to the next episode of The Good Government Show.